ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to 19 to the Dozen, or as I like to call it, the 1912 podcast. My guest today is Amir Sheikh. Amir is the founder and CEO of 4B. 4B is a startup news agency which has a really unique model. 4B aims at bringing in both sides of controversial views and topics together on a singular platform for civil discussion and civil discourse, something which I think is necessary in today's time. We had a fantastic discussion. We spoke about everything from his inspirations in starting his business to what it is like today in terms of the US political climate. Overall, really enjoyed the conversation. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Amir Sheikh. Thank you. 3, 2, 1, and we are live. How's it going, man?
Good. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. It's awesome that that we can have this conversation, and I can pick your brain and get your thoughts on things and stuff. So thanks for coming on, though.
No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Cool. So I just want to jump right in. Your business is called 4B.
That's correct.
What does the B stand for? What does 4B stand for?
Yeah, so 4B it started a while ago and it kind of morphed, but initially it started with the fourth branch, which is it's made up. It's there's 3 branches of government in the U.S. and so the fourth is the people, kind of, and so it started from that name, and then it's just not cool. It doesn't sound good, and I think people don't really get it. And so as the platform was being developed, a lot of the features started to organically group into 4s. And so I kind of thought of a more catchy name, and so took out the fourth and just put 4, and then B is obviously used to be branch. So that's kind of how it evolved into 4B, and then there's obviously a cool little logo with that. But it sounds better. It's easier to absorb, and then it kind of goes with the 4's flow within the platform.
Right. Awesome. And what was the inspiration for you starting this business? I know that your business basically focuses on both sides of a topic. So what made you get to this point?
Yeah, I think it's been years of life, and I think that I got to a position where I have a little bit of time and flexibility to work on a project like this, but I've had this frustration for years where I look at media and I look at news and data from pretty much everyone, and I see bias, I see a number of different strategies that everyone uses that I consider to be lying personally, but technically it might not be lying. So for example, if people cover an incident and depending on their viewpoint, they might exclude certain points, right, when they're reporting on it. Now, again, that might not be considered lying to, by the book, but if you're reporting on that and you know who your audience is, then you're kind of intentionally, misleading them by excluding that. Or for example, if there's an event or if there's an incident and you take one point which represents maybe like less than 1% of that incident, and you highlight it and you exaggerate it and you make it such a big deal, and that's all you talk about, then again, your followers or your viewers will look at it as if, wow, that was the whole event and that was the main point of the event. So you're not lying again, but there's just different, and we can go on and on with different kind of strategies that the networks and other media use to mislead their people. And it's basically feeding into their base and what they want to hear, and keep them in their bubbles, not exposed to the other side. So I think that frustration from every point of view, from every outlet, just got me to a point where I was like, okay, I can either continue to complain to friends and family, or I can say, hey, you know what, let me see if I can do something about it. And so that's how this platform was initially conceived. From there, it's been a well over a year process, and we're a couple weeks out from an official launch, but it's definitely come a long way.
That's awesome. And I was taking a look at your website, and I noticed that you have two writers for every story that you cover. And I find that really
Yeah.
interesting because most news outlets would only have one writer, and they give their perspective or their point of view or whatever. That's a very interesting strategy that I've never seen before. How how do you manage to get these writers to have these conflicting sort of sides and these debates as such? Like, how do you find them?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think to your point, if you do look at other mainstream sources, they have multiple writers that contribute, but they're not opposing. So they're kind of helping each other out. But I think we are very unique in that uh, setup and process. So to kind of get to your question about how do we find it, that's where a lot of our work is on the back end, is going through count hundreds and hundreds of writers who are qualified and within those certain categories that are of interest, and then essentially kind of vetting them out for our platform. We are in short form, so each article is approximately 500 words. It's unofficial. We don't announce it. The purpose of that is kind of site consistency. So when you come to our platform, you kind of get a feel. Okay, it'll take me about this much time to read an article, right, or get through an article. And so that means each writer does 250 words, and it really puts a lot of pressure on the writers to write 250. The challenge becomes getting it down to 250 words, not writing 250
Right,
words.
right.
And for all the writers out there, you guys will understand. And so it really forces the writers to get to the point, not waste any words. And then the benefit to the reader is it's to the point. You know, you don't have to listen to all this fluff and, you know, all of these other things. But so I think with the writers, even with actually with most writers, they're not used to that. You know, they get 500 to 1,000 minimum, and you know that gives them room to kind of stretch their legs, and so it becomes frustrating, I think, for many that aren't used to it. And then you mix that other dynamic of an opposing writer, which is on the same article, and then it really kind of complicates things. And so there is a little bit of a learning curve. Initially, conceptually, it sounds great, but when you get into it, you know, there's a lot of moving parts. And we have a small editing team right now that kind of manages and brokers the writers together so that it's more seamless. And there's a lot of the vetting process, and before any article is written, you know, there's points that are being shared that we must approve. And so there's a whole process that took basically this whole year to get. And so if I shared that with you, it would probably be relatively basic, but it took a lot of trial and error to get to that point where, you know, we can very efficiently and productively, you know, manage hundreds of writers and get them to, you know,
How
strangers
many
to
writers do you
basically
have?
communicate efficiently. What's that?
How many writers do you have?
So at the moment, we're over 150
Really?
that are active right now. And so I think that, and we're looking to grow that. I mean, as we launch, you know, we'll have 15 categories that readers can subscribe to. And so we need to fill that. And, you know, one of the things that's important is that we don't have a monotone voice, and we have the same perspective and same voice. And so part of that is the diversity in writers, whether it's in age and background and writing style, all of those things to keep people kind of on their heels, and also introduce other ideas. You know, as you go through this project, you hear some ideas like, wow, you know, nobody ever thought of that. And if you have the same people, you don't get that. You become predictable. And so
Exactly.
I think that's a big part of it. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge. We've come a long way. I think we've gotten down to a pretty good science where we can manage it. But it's much more difficult, significantly more difficult than what you see out there, which is mostly reporting on the news, and it's one person and they have the full creativity. So
Yeah, there must be so many stories out there to cover as well. So I can imagine like just even finding the right story and the right writers to match them up for it must be an incredibly challenging task, really, as well, right?
yeah, it's actually, we're limited. So our stories are are significantly less than what everybody else has, because our standard is there has to be a controversy. And another step further is the controversy has to be relatively evenly split, right? So, for example, we could potentially, but let's just say if there is the earth flat, right? If we did that story,
Mm-hmm.
we probably wouldn't do that because there's not enough people who believe the earth is flat, right?
Right.
And so the story or the article wouldn't, one side would get beat up, right? Essentially, if you want to use that analogy. And so we want it to be relatively evenly split where people are intrigued and they start using their brain and, they respect one another. And so I think that limits a lot of stories. And then if you read the news, a lot of the stories are, hey, A happened at B time at C location, right? That we would never do that, right? Our
Mm-hmm.
point is to look at a controversial issue, ask a question, which is very difficult to do. And that question has to be polarizing. That question has to be something that both sides, or you have two distinct sides that are relatively evenly split. And then you need to present it in a factual, cited way that is not an opinion piece. But the writers essentially do their research on most of the people within that group, and then they represent that within the articles.
Right. So is that really how you choose the writer for the article? So you just give it, what's the process like to get a writer to to write a particular article? I mean, I assume you mentioned
Yeah,
that research was one of them, of course, right? They would have
yeah.
to do their own research as such, but how would you ensure that the information which they're putting out is actually factual?
Yeah, so we have a small editing team internally which fact checks everybody. Obviously, when we hire a writer on, we go through a process so they understand. But outside of that, we still double check them. We go through the citations and the reference, make sure everything is good to go. And we do our best. That's really important for us as a platform, as 4B, that we're neutral, even though we're presenting different sides.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we have to stay neutral in this, and we have to stay fact-based.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's a couple of layers and processes in place to make sure that we don't put out any information that is unfactual, at least with the citations. And when we talk about facts, it has to be cited.
Is it a challenge to remain neutral though in today's time? Because and
Definitely.
you see these on both sides, right? You like if you're not with us, you're against us. So
Yep,
how
definitely.
do
I
you
mean,
overcome that?
yeah, it's still a challenge, and I think it always will be a challenge. I think that's something that, as a brand and as a platform, we have to establish ourselves. I talk to people on both sides, on all sides of these issues, and if you talk to them, they'll all say they're open-minded, right? They'll all say, "Oh, I can hear the other side. I understand." But when you start putting people together, then you start hearing, "Wait, that guy's crazy, or that girl is crazy, or they don't know what they're talking about." And every side is doing it, right? And so I think that we all have this image of ourselves. However, it's just we're just not very open-minded, and that's one of the goals of the platform, is to bring people together, not to divide, which is what we see everywhere. So it's a challenge short term, and it's going to be a challenge long term, but it's one of the goals I feel like this platform can be a benefit to humanity.
Yeah. What is the ultimate goal though for your platform? Like, what do you want to achieve with this particular platform?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that concept of bringing people together by listening and getting exposed to the other side is the ultimate goal. And so we're not here to change anyone's mind. So if you believe the earth is flat, you believe the earth is flat. If you believe it's round, that's right, that's fine. But what we want is to have productive discourse on our platform, so that if you believe the earth is round, you're not going to make fun of the person who thinks it's flat. You're going to listen to their points. And there's a place, we have voting questions on there. We also have
Mm-hmm.
comments, and there's a social aspect of it, which we're actually currently in development as well to expand on that. But we really want it to be a organized, safe space where people can speak without, and not about name calling, but actually in in the facts and through reason and through respect and expose each other. So I think that if we can get to that level, we can get rid of some of the divisiveness. And if you look at, most conflicts on the planet, it's really on it's a thin line. It's not like, people are like miles apart. It's like very small issues. And some of those issues in most cases are because there's just not enough knowledge on both sides, right? Or people are misunderstanding the other side. And I think if we can put those people together and create that environment, we can kind of bridge that gap. And so I think that would be the ultimate goal in my mind. And people, whether it's in sports or whether it's in fashion or whatever it is, I want them to come onto the platform, whatever the issue is, and have a productive a space to talk and to come together.
And having that meaningful dialogue, I think, is really necessary in today's day and age. Like more so now than ever before, I think. With everything being so divisive and such. I mean, like I was taking a look at your website and I noticed the polling option as well. And it's really cool to actually do that, because I never actually, I do see some polls on some news websites, but not to the extent to which you guys have it. Like you have like 3 or 4 different polls on one article. And I think that's awesome. But people are respectful in the comments as well, which is
I think
surprising
right
for
now
me.
we're not officially launched yet, and so
Yeah.
we have quite a few users, but they're mostly a lot of the people that I know, they're writers, and so I think once we open up, we're anticipating, and we have things in place to have trolls, and just like anywhere else, when you bring numbers in, you're going to have those people. But I think that when I would say, like, this is maybe, I don't know if this is a good analogy, but you go to a nice restaurant, there's no sign saying, hey, you need to talk softly or you need to dress a certain way or
Right.
any of those things. But when you create that environment, people kind of automatically behave a little bit differently. And I think, to that effect, we want to create that platform here and put certain things in place so that people know, hey, this is not a place for name calling. This is not a place to attack the other side. This is a place to learn and to share and to understand. And I think that if we can do that, we will limit it. You're still going to get the crazy person coming to the restaurant, but I think we can put some of those things into place.
Yeah.
To prevent that.
I find it fascinating how these bigger organizations like, I don't know, YouTube, Facebook, like manage their comment sections, because I mean, look at Facebook's comment section. It's like this cesspool of rubbish, which is just thrown at you over there itself. I mean,
right.
It must be an incredibly challenging thing to do, right? To manage. So like, do you have any best practices in place to manage your comment section as such? I mean, I know you mentioned like right now that it's mostly people who you know and the writers as such, but do you have any plans for managing?
So right now we have a flagging system within. So let's say if you're on the app, so we're on App Store and Google Play Store. If you see a comment you don't like, you can flag it. For example, we monitor it daily. There's a separate section kind of on our back end to monitor it. And like I said, right now it's easy because, we don't have high volume. Once we start kicking up and we officially launch the platform, it is going to be a challenge. And, as we grow, we'll probably have to have, a dedicated person or people to kind of monitor that, which I assume some of the big platforms have. But I kind of go back to the restaurant analogy, is that, if you have a nicer restaurant, you have nicer things relative, you're going to limit that. But, you just can't make it go away. The only way you make it go away is you just don't allow people to talk, and then you kind of defeat the purpose. So
exactly, completely against
when you're here to socialize and to network and to share ideas, you have to accept the extremes with that. You can't say, hey, I'm only going to take, the middle people or certain people who can behave.
Right.
It's going to be everyone.
I like what Reddit does, though. Reddit has that upvote and downvote button, so you can upvote a comment, and the upvotes essentially go up and the downvotes go all the way down, essentially. So I think that's the good way.
We have the same thing. We have an upvote function. So our algorithm is pretty, actually, again, because we don't have the volume, so we won't see, and we're working on it, but we have an algorithm in the comment section that will have the top 4 comments. And so that's basically organized by the number of followers a person has. So on our platform, when you create a profile, you have followers and following similar to Instagram. So if you make a comment on a specific article, and let's just say you have 10,000 followers, if you go to Instagram or Facebook, if you go to the bigger platforms, you're going to be seen if you have a large following, because they want, people, that exposure. So on our platform, we basically take the top 4 categories. So basically it's dynamic, but like, let's say if you're 0 to 50 followers, right? So if you have 3 followers and you make a really good comment, well, you're only going to compete with people that are within your follower size, and
Right.
you'll still get that top spot. And so you'll be visible to the entire platform because you're only competing with that. Now, if you have 10,000 followers, you're going to be competing against other people who have 10,000 followers. So you still, so you're not competing against, you're competing against different people, but all 4 of you will have an opportunity to have that spot to be visible and to influence people. So it's a little unique in that way. There's a few other things that I think on the back end algorithm that we have in place and that we will have in place to really, reward people who are contributing to the topic, not, productively. And so those people will kind of come to the top, and it doesn't matter if you're, if you're from the middle of nowhere and you have no followers. If you take the time and you contribute something positive, you have a chance to be on the top on our platform. So that's really important for us.
Interesting. Um, yeah, at least for me, like I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Reddit, and I take a look at, I follow a lot of these bigger news organizations really, and I notice, the way they actually post particular topics and the kind of reactions that each of their bases gets for the topics, and especially on Facebook, which is really cool, because on Facebook they recently added the what do you call, the reaction buttons. You have the angry, the laughing
Right.
face, and all that. And it's like on CNN, when something is more traditionally Trump hating, for example, you'd see a lot more loves and likes, whereas if it's on Fox News side, it's like a lot of angers and stuff. So
Right. Yep.
yeah, yeah, I think what you're doing is what I think you're doing is amazing, really. The way you're actually, you're managing to bring 2 sides of the argument together, and I think that's where traditional news really fails. They
Yeah. I think with the 2 sides, I want to kind of make this point because it's important. Like, I think on any given issue, there's probably thousands of perspectives, right?
Mhm.
And the reason why we focus on 2 sides is that just the way human civilization works and society works, that's just how organically people kind of drift to 2 major points. That's not to ignore the other points, but we need to have change, and we need to have something positive and and have an effect. And I think if we try to try to swallow something that's too big, we're not going to have an effect. It's going to be diluted. And so that's why we kind of focus on 2. But that's just how, you look at Democrats and Republicans, or if you look at, just on most issues, there's 2 sides to that. But
Yeah, it
yeah,
just doesn't seem to be any in between these days. Like as I said earlier, it's like you're either with us or you're against us, and that's
right,
how it is these days. So, I mean, I'm left leaning on a lot of things, but I'm also right leaning on a lot of things too. So
right,
like, for example, if I say that, I am pro-choice, that's more of a left-leaning argument. But like, they would, the people on the right would be like, oh, you lefty, communist, all of these things, right? So
right.
my question to you is, why do you think traditional media is dying in this day and age?
Well, I don't think that they're dying. I think they're doing pretty well. I think financially,
Trust in the
and
media.
I guess
Trust in the media, I
yeah,
would say.
it depends on what metric you're using. But financially, I think they're doing okay. But I think that's actually the reason why you're asking this question, is because they've kind of committed to that, profits and financial success. And in order to do that, you have to be divisive. If you start reporting on stuff that in a boring way, but it's accurate, people aren't going to care. They're not going to read. It's just human nature. They're not intrigued. And so your ratings are going to go down. You're going to make less money. But if you, instead of, just having an accurate and factual article on whatever you're reporting on, you make it a little bit divided and you hold back some information and you do all of these things, then more people will be interested and they'll share it. And, you get more traffic and then ultimately you make more money. So I think it's tied to that, the financial goals that they have and the growth goals that they have, that we are in this position.
So they basically just want the clicks, essentially.
They just want to what?
Yeah, they just want the clicks, essentially, on the article.
Yeah, I mean the clicks or whatever the platform they're on.
How,
I mean, it's about money.
How do you navigate through something like that? I mean, obviously businesses are made for profit, right? So
Yep.
how do you navigate through something like that while you need to be engaging, but at the same time you need to be factual? I think that's a fine line that you need to tread. So how do you navigate through these kind of waters?
Yeah, I mean, I think our concept is unique in that we're not picking a lane, right? So if you look at like in the you CNN, for example, or Fox News, for example, they would be considered opposites. They pick their lane. They know who their consumers are, and they cater to their consumers. For us, we don't have a specific lane. We have all lanes, and so we don't necessarily have to balance that. We just have to make sure that we're, again, stay factual and stay relevant and make sure we have a pulse on what people are interested in. But as far as, who we cater to, we don't have that limitation. Now, what we do have to make sure is that our topics and our, writers and points of view and all of that stay balanced so that we don't start to tip, one way or another, and we stay neutral in all ways. But I think that we definitely have the advantage that we don't have a specific target or consumer to please.
Right. And what about
And
the
we
political?
actually feed off of it. We'll be more successful the more different points of views that we have. That actually is better for us. So we want as much diversity on our platform as possible, and that's really what will help us separate from the rest of the group, from the big networks, and really help us take off and carve out our niche and grow from there.
When you say diversity, you mean diversity of opinion?
Diversity of opinion, diversity of consumer, diversity of content, diversity of even the ideas and the questions and the directions. Like there's a lot of topics that we've had and we've done a lot of experimenting that people were offended by. Hey, why are you even talking about that? Well, we want to push the limit. If it's a legitimate topic that people are talking about, just because it offends you doesn't mean we're not going to do it. And so
which one was
diversity in all of ways.
Which one was the most
What's
divisive?
that?
Which one was the most divisive topic that you had?
I think, right now, so I don't have that up, but when we first started initially, I was experimenting with a number of writers, and, we just through processes. And one of the topics I chose was abortion, just because I know it's a divisive issue. And yeah, that was just such a heated, and at that point we didn't have a lot of the processes in place, the editing team, all that. So it was mostly me learning. And it was just, it was crazy. It was like a reality show in a way. And, you take these very educated, intelligent individuals who are very calm and open-minded. And then, you put a topic like that and, you just see fireworks start flying. And it's just, so I think that, we don't have that specific question, but, we don't necessarily attack like big questions. Like we won't say something that's can't be necessarily even covered in 500 words, because then you kind of do it injustice.
Right.
But so a big part of it is the questions that we ask. It has to be super laser focused, and we have to do our research before we put the question out to make sure that the writers are set up for success. If we just ask any question and we don't do the research, the writers will fail because they're not able to deliver, and the article won't come together well. So there's a lot more that goes into it, I think, and we have a lot of disadvantages in that sense. But that just puts a lot more pressure on us to make sure we know what we're doing, and we have a good team that understands this.
Mm-hmm. And you're based in California right now.
That's correct. Yep.
What's the political climate like in the US? Because I mean, I'm sitting up over here in Canada and I'm seeing all the rubbish that's going on down there, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, it's just crazy. I mean, I think that, we're in a unique situation where, obviously with the COVID situation, just put a huge pressure on everyone, financially, the mental state. And then you have, with George Floyd, and then you have the race issues, and you have all of these things kind of combined. I think they're all connected. So it's, even though they are separate issues, they're all connected. When you have, something as big as COVID, you're going to start to see weaknesses in other areas and breakdowns. And that's what we see kind of evidence of. We're just kind of in the mix. So it just looks like all these things are going on. But, 5 years or 10 years from now, we'll be all considered kind of one big event. And it's interesting. It's a human experiment. I mean, you see, if you believe in aliens or whatnot, if they were looking at our planet, they would look at us like an experiment, like, hey, look
Yeah.
there's this disease. How did we react? And I think we probably failed. But yeah, it's just, it's very interesting, I think, to kind of look at how people are reacting and how people are looking at the situation. We have our five senses, and, we can only absorb so much data at any given point. And it's very limited. We probably, just on planet Earth, you will have probably infinite 0% of the information on the planet you'll be able to consume in your entire life, right? But when we speak and we act, we talk like, hey, I know, or whether it's history, whether it's your life, whether it's other people's lives, we speak as if we know. And you have less than, almost 0% knowledge. How is that possible? And I think that it's just interesting to kind of see that human behavior. On the flip side, though, as humans, we have to act, right? So you can't just say, hey, just because I don't have information, I'm not going to do anything. But there's a balance there. And I think that we haven't got that balance down right. And that's a big part of, again, the platform, is that when you bring people together, collectively, we have some knowledge. Now you go from 0% to maybe a few percent, but it's better than individually where we're at zero. And so I think that's where, I'd really like people to come together.
Yeah, and whereas from what I see right now is the left and the right, they are having absolutely no conversation with each other. I mean, I don't think they realize, at least the ones on the radical ends of the spectrum, I don't think they realize that the left needs the right and the right needs the left for everything to be kept in balance. And at this point in time, there's just a complete breakdown of communication from what I see. And it's become really frustrating, honestly, for regular individuals like myself as well, because you see the news and you see one side of a story, and then you start questioning, is this the correct information? And then, where do I go for the other information? There's just so much going on, and it's just so hard to keep up with. So yeah,
right.
I completely
no,
get it.
it's tough, I think. And again, we look at it from our individual selfish perspectives, and from our own shoes and eyes. And so I think that's where it becomes even more challenging, because we're all seeing different things. But I do think after, again, 5 or 10 years from now, when we look back, we'll start to understand. And maybe this is a necessary step. Sometimes we look at things, if you look at the 20th century, for example, I think that more people died and there was more pain and suffering in the 20th century than probably all of human history combined, probably,
Absolutely.
Right? In sheer numbers. But there's also the most progress, made in the 20th century with technology, with healthcare, with social equality, and all of these movements. All this happened in the 20th century. And so I think sometimes, we kind of start to focus on one thing, and we look at the 20th century and we say World War I, World War II, because
Hmm.
those are bad things. But we should also focus on the feminist movement. We should also focus on, hey, we made it to the moon, and we've cured most bacterial infections, and there's so many things that there's to celebrate. But we naturally as humans we start to focus on the
On the
negative. And
negatives.
yeah, and we don't understand. And some of those things, like for example, the moon, you can make the argument that we would never have made it to the moon if
It
if we
won
didn't
for
have the
Russia.
war. And I'm not saying that that was worth it, but I think that the world is so much more complicated than we understand, and we try to simplify it and explain it. And again, that's why I kind of go back to, we got to combine our heads, come together, and our strengths and weaknesses together
Mhm.
are complete the picture. And so that's really important.
Yeah, I think, the human tendency to be biased is always going to be there. Like, regardless of how unbiasedly, I don't know if that's even a word, if you look at something, there's still going to be some element of bias in us, regardless of what it might be, and that's something which I don't know if human beings can ever kick. It's just
Yeah, I
part
mean,
of our nature.
yeah, I think that's where again, I think we look at it from a time perspective. We don't factor that in, but even with technology, we have over the last 20 to 30 years just like shot up exponentially on our technology and how it integrates with our life. And but biologically, we haven't had time to adapt, right? So our vision is designed to look out into the woods or at regular thing. It's not designed to look at a blue screen, for example, right? So we're going to have
Hmm.
health problems, we're going to have health issues because our bodies aren't biologically designed for that. Now, after several generations, maybe there'll be some adaptation to our bodies. And same thing with human interaction. Like, people are making connections on social media. I don't think we're designed for that. We're designed for people, right? To talk and to meet and to shake hands, all those things. And there's health benefits to that. And so when we take that away, there's side effects to that. And those changes in the bodies, it takes time. It takes generations and generations. It's not going to happen in 20 years, and definitely not in a lifetime. And so I think that when we try to look at things, we look at things obviously within our lifetime, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong. And so maybe if we look 1,000 years from now, we'll look at this period as a transitional period. Like, hey, our bodies
Hmm.
were changing, our minds were changing, and some of this social discourse was very necessary to get us to the next step, whatever that step is, right? And so I think that it's all about perspective. Which perspective you look at, and to kind of see what the reality is.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you need to have perspective in anything in life, right? There's this book I'm reading, and there's a rule. There's a chapter in this book called what is it called? Assume that the person you're speaking to knows something you don't. And I think that
I haven't
that's
read that. No.
okay. It's from a book called The 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson.
Okay,
I'm sure you must
got
have
it.
heard of the guy. Yeah,
I know
he's
Jordan. I know Jordan
yeah,
Peterson.
yeah.
Yep, I haven't read the book. Yep.
Yeah, it's a very deep book. It's a very heavy book in that sense because like the guy has a tendency of rambling on, but um there's this one part of the book which says to assume the person you're speaking to knows something you don't. And I think that's fundamental, because it's only when you speak to someone you get to understand their perspective on things, and that's how you can have that sort of meaningful dialogue and the two-way flow of conversation, which is just not happening these days. It's all about
Yeah, for
it's all
sure.
about the
No,
yeah,
for
it's all
sure.
about the
Yeah, no, I
cancel
think that
culture and stuff.
absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that this freedom of speech thing is a big deal, and we definitely incorporate that into our platform. But we don't. Freedom of speech is very, very important. I think that when you say that, hey, for example, if we talk about hate speech, right? Um, we should ban hate speech, or we should punish people for hate speech. I guess the first question is, who defines what hate speech is, right? So
Hmm.
you can say something that I consider hateful, but you think it's fine, and vice versa, right? So it's definitely subjective. And so basically what you're saying is when we're not okay with freedom of speech, or we want to control hate speech, or we want to control certain types of speech, you're basically saying is whoever's in power gets to decide, and that's the direction we're going to go. And I
Right.
think that only time that democracy works, or only time that when we talk about censorship, um, the reason you need censorship is because there's some level of inequality. But when you have everyone able to contribute, then you don't need censorship, because the best idea will come out. But if you're suppressing something, then it will. And so I think that when we need to understand that when we look at the world, and we look at some of the networks, and we look at some of the things around us, um, before we say, hey, we should stop that, we should censor that, and we should instead focus on, hey, is everybody able to speak?
Hmm.
And kind of going back to, like, I didn't, the wisdom of the crowd, right? And I think this is somewhere in the earlier 20th century with there was a cow that was cut up, and people had to guess, I think, the weight or the pieces or something like that. I seen a modern day version with there was a jar of like marbles, I think, right? And I don't know, there was like 13 or 1400 marbles in there. Nobody knew. And so you take a group of, let's say, 50 people, I think it was, and they're diverse groups. So you have young children to old people, different genders, all of that. And then you take a couple of people who are very smart, and you let those two people guess how many pieces are in that jar, and they'll be off by a significant amount. Now, if you get in those 50 people and you give them equal opportunity, there's no there's no punishment or reward. They just guess whatever they guess. And you
Hmm.
take the mean of the 50, they're like within like a couple of points, like they're right there,
Really?
exact. And it happened, and that's called wisdom of the crowd. And it works only, again, if there's no other forces. Kind of, it has to be a free market. But it's interesting. What's interesting about that to me is that to get that almost precise answer every time, the 50 people also consists of people who guess 10, and there's somebody who guesses 10,000, right?
Hmm.
But if you don't have those people, those extreme people, your number is going to be off.
Right.
So when we talk about center, if you only have center, then you're going to be off. You need those extreme crazy people. And if you bring that back to ideas and things, sometimes we look at people who are crazy and we just don't realize what contribution they have to society and how that keeps us on direction. And I think that it's important now more than ever to let people speak. And if someone is crazy, right, and someone you don't agree with, and they're wrong, then you should actually want them to speak. You should give them your microphone, because you want the world to
Look
know
at
they're
this
crazy,
guy.
right?
Yeah, look at this guy. He's
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Why
yeah.
would you censor them? Like,
Exactly.
here, take it. You talk.
Mhm.
Let the world, see how crazy you are. But instead, we're stopping them. And the reason we're stopping is because deep down inside, some of us know maybe they're right on some of these things, right? Otherwise, why would you censor somebody?
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, I think I think the today's cancel culture has gone absolute bonkers. I mean, just simple things which you wouldn't even consider racist are now being considered racist. There was this. I don't know if you know about Justin Trudeau and his blackface controversy.
yeah, I heard about it. I don't know much about it, but I did hear about it.
Yeah, so the guy was a drama teacher back in 20 years ago. He was a drama teacher, and one day he went dressed up as Aladdin, I think, and he just
Right,
he painted himself brown or
right,
whatever.
right,
Just to fit into the character really, and he behaved like the character, and now people are calling him out for him putting on blackface, but it wasn't really blackface. And then they started saying that he was racist and xenophobe and all kinds of names they called him. And I've seen Justin Trudeau over the past like 6 years over here in Canada, and the guy has he's done so much for immigrants that
right,
for something this minuscule and this tiny to affect this guy's um, position and office so much is insane. Because you're looking at this one small little blip with as opposed to all of the good that he's done for immigrants. Like for
right,
permanent residents right now, he's actually the Liberal Party is actually removing the fee structure that would allow permanent residents to become citizens. So basically they're making them citizens for free. And
right.
there's so much good that the guy is doing for immigrants, but this
Yeah.
is, and it just doesn't make
Yeah.
sense to me.
Yeah, and that all comes by censorship again. When you have people who only get exposed to one side of the information or certain information or from a certain bias or perspective, and that's what happens because they're not exposed and they have this, you know, the other side is evil, the other side is bad, and in reality, there's a the same percentage of murders or criminals are around or everywhere around the world. The difference is the environment, right? And so
Right.
if you grow up in the inner city in a crime infested or a higher crime environment, statistically you're going to have a higher chance of committing a crime. That doesn't mean you're a criminal, but your environment kind of shapes you. And conversely, if you grow up in a nice a neighborhood, affluent neighborhood, your chances of committing a crime growing up are going to be significantly lower. That doesn't mean you're any less of a criminal or more of a criminal. It's our environment changes that. And I think that with the perspectives what you're talking about, especially with cancel culture, they're only seeing one part of it, and they're also not seeing the consequences. I think that we're very short-sighted and very selfish as humans, and we just look at things from just one specific point of view and perspective, and that's it. Like, I don't want to hear anything else. Don't talk to me about anything else, and that's it. And so that's the side effect and the effect of that culture.
I think it's human beings' proclivity to negativity, and just negativity in general. Like we I mean, think about it. If you do a certain something, like you've gone on stage and I don't know, you played the guitar, and you shredded the guitar, but on this one part of the song, you just messed up a few chords, for example. You may have played the entire song really well, but you're going to be gravitating to that small little 2 or 3 seconds for where you
Yeah.
just messed it up, right? So it's just human nature to gravitate towards something which is negative. I don't know
Yeah.
what that is about human nature, really.
But that's good. That's how we got here, though. I mean, I think that it's important that we don't forget, like, if we don't pick on those things, you don't improve, right? Now,
Right.
we take it to an extreme, and I think that the application of it in the social environment and specifically in cancel culture is very damaging, right? So, but I like to make analogies, but a simple analogy: if you take, a Ferrari, a nice Ferrari is a nice car. It drives fast, it feels good, all of those things, right? But if you take a Ferrari and you start going off road, you're going to break the car and it's going to be
Hmm.
useless to you, right? And so, but that doesn't mean that the car is now bad. Or that doesn't mean that the car is useless. It just means that, it's not useful in that environment. And I think that, a lot of times we look at things and we're like, okay, well, this is useful, this is good. Okay, I'm happy if it's in your road, but if it goes somewhere else, all of a sudden now look, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And I think that with cancel culture and with people, we look at it that way. Same thing with history. When you take down statues and condemn historical figures. I'm sure, and I don't want to go into a specific name, but there are some bad people that are
Right.
clearly bad. But then there's a lot of gray area, and I think in those gray areas, it's very dangerous to use today's morals and ethics and what's acceptable today and apply that to people in the past under completely different circumstances. You're basically saying now that you're better than whoever that person is or whoever
Hmm.
those people are. And, people are people. Again, it's the same number of good and bad people. And so if you're trying to say a whole, political party is bad or a whole civilization or geography or whatever it is bad, that's in essence, that's racism, right? Or that's,
Exactly.
xenophobia or
Yeah.
whatnot. But we're doing that.
It's something that we have to come to terms with, and it's something that we need to really fix this problem. And once again, going back to what I said, both sides, they need each other. Like they need to have a cohesive debate and find balance somewhere along the middle, and that's not happening. There's always going
Yeah.
to be hierarchies in nature, and I think what the left is doing at this point in time is looking at that hierarchy and saying, no, we should just get rid of the entire hierarchy because it leads to inequality, and it leads to a lot of people being stagnated at the bottom and all of that.
Yep.
And but you cannot have a you cannot not have a hierarchy. You cannot not have
Right.
a hierarchy in society. You need to have a hierarchy in society because uh, everyone has their own competencies, right? And and that's what leads to if you don't have a hierarchy, it leads to something representative of maybe the Soviet Union or Maoist China. And similarly on the right, the right seems to simply just silence everything that the left says, regardless of it being good or bad. It's just such a weird time that we live in at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, there's probably something going on that, that me and you and probably nobody can see, and it's on a larger scale, and we don't understand it yet. And I think that, again, whether it's a decade from now or a century from now, we'll look back and they'll, once you can kind of see it from an outside perspective and get all the data, you can understand what's going on. But I think there's a lot more going on than, we can you just perceive. Like I said, we only have so many senses and so many data points, and it's difficult to understand that.
I just think it's the mix of. I think it's a mix of everything that's going on right now. It started with COVID, and then the frustration with COVID and being under lockdown for so long, and then suddenly these the George Floyd protests come up, and it's election year, and then Hong Kong is being taken over by China again, and it's just like just so many things which are going on at the same time. Like you said, it's very hard for us to process all of this information coming at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's also conflict of interest, like, just like with the media networks, a lot of the celebrities, a lot of the politicians, unfortunately, are driven by the same motivations, right? And they're demagogues, and they have to appease their groups in order to stay in their spots. And so, even if the politician knows that this is wrong, or this is not healthy, or this is divisive, they're going to do it because that's in their best interest, right? Whether it's them personally, their family, their group, whoever it is. And I think that that's a big part of it. And that's why I'm really, against censorship, and, let there be free market, let there be freedom in every way, is because then the true champion, whether it's a true champion idea, true champion people, whatever that is, will come victorious, because you don't put any barriers in. And I think that's a big part of it, is that people are just everybody's a demagogue today, and they're just pleasing whoever they are, and that's contributing to this divisiveness.
Right, exactly. I mean, I'm seeing companies like large corporations, like just adding fuel to the fire when it comes to these things, and everyone is choosing sides over here, so it gets very hard as, like, let's say, an employer of an organization who doesn't share that particular view to be part of that organization and have to comply with these things because he needs his job, right? So, like, it's something that I think has been taken a little too far at this point.
Yeah.
Especially with these large corporations. I mean, you see all these big companies like Coke and the Facebook ad boycott. I don't remember how many companies boycotted Facebook, but there was a whole bunch, like Coke, for example. I mean, clearly they're doing it more for it's more of like business purposes, which is why they're doing it, right? I mean, they're doing it to appease their base, as you say, right? And also come out looking like the good guy, in this situation. But at the same time, these guys, like, I can almost certainly guarantee that these guys are going to go back to Facebook at some given point in time when all this stuff blows over. But really, what they're doing right now is very short-sighted, and they're not looking at the long-term impacts of what they're doing, because they have a whole bunch of these followers. Like, even these celebs, right? They have a whole bunch of these followers, and they have the responsibility of what they say and what they do. And because these followers, a lot of them are impressionable, a lot of them are kids, and they can take what these celebrities say and go forward with that, thinking that it's the right thing to do because Gal Gadot or whatever said it, right? So,
but although I agree with you on that point that they have a responsibility, they also don't. Like, they didn't take any classes, they didn't sign anything, they didn't say, hey, I am now responsible for my 1 million followers or whatnot. So technically they don't. We didn't put any incentives or anything in place to ensure that. And I think that that's part of the damage that is being done, is that we have social media today where you can be in the middle of nowhere and you can influence millions of people, but you're not qualified to do that. Like, you might not have any education, any training, any knowledge, but you're now affecting millions of people. And combined, if you take these micro people, it's billions of people are being influenced by people who are not qualified, right? And we're making decisions based off of this, whether it's cancel culture, whether it's the political laws and the voting, or how we behave, how do we interact with each other. All of these things are influenced by, in the past, used to be a few people who were maybe earned their spot. They might not be qualified and they might have been nefarious too, but it was still controllable because if one person was bad, we can get them out, right? Or attempt to get them out. Now it's like they're everywhere. And so,
Yeah.
what do you do with that problem? How do you change that, that perception of people that, hey, you know what? No, America's, legal system is racist, right? There's systematic racism. um, you know, again, I don't like necessarily to give my personal opinion, but regardless if you believe if that's true or false, my issue is that people who die hard believe one way or the other, they don't even have the evidence. They don't even have the data. They're just saying things because they feel that way, because their influencer or the people around them are
Herd
saying this.
mentality.
Yeah, and they're like, okay,
Mhm.
no, it has to be. I'm passionate about it, and I'm going to scream and yell. But if you ask them the details, they wouldn't be able to tell you anything. And so I think that's where it's damaging. It's not, is that we need to bring all the information together. I do believe if every single person in this planet, regardless of what the issue is, if they're exposed to all sides and they listen to all sides, we would be in a very different place. We would go different directions because people will be like, oh, wait a minute, maybe I'm not right. Or maybe, this is a better direction or whatnot. Instead, we just, stay within our community or tribe or whatever that is. And it just continues to divide people.
Right, yeah. I was having this discussion with one of my friends in another episode as well about human beings and tribalism and how we have always been tribal in our behaviors. So, and we were talking about the racism aspect of it as well, and how people view things as racist when sometimes it's just simple tribalism. You have, and I
Exactly.
gave the example of sports teams, right? I mean, you'll wear their colors. You can have your best friend, but he may support the other team, and you may hate him for supporting the other team, right? Just simply because he supports another team, does it affect your relationship in any way? No, it doesn't really affect your relationship. Does it
Right.
affect anything else besides who wins and who loses the game? No, it doesn't. But people are so diehard fanatics about these things that they seem to forget everything. And that's what human beings are. We are tribal people, right? We prefer to be within people of our own particular group, right? So when we see different ethnicities around and we're not used to their cultures, um, it's something which is unknown to us, right? So I I think there needs to be more education in the system in terms of
Yeah.
racial, cultural education, I should say. um, just because of how different cultures are, and as the world is becoming a smaller and smaller place, we're going to be seeing more people with different cultures and different backgrounds. And there needs to be education on how we need to interact with these people and um, how we should be aware of what their culture is like as well, right? I mean, I don't know. It's again, it's a very deep-rooted topic and very complex in nature. But there has to be some sort of education amongst people to understand different ethnicities and different backgrounds and different cultures.
Yeah, I just say exposure. I mean, just expose people. I mean, I think that there is an invisible hand out there that everything balances out. As long as you don't restrain it and you censor and you put chains and locks and things like that, you let it open, it'll balance out to equilibrium. And that's the way nature works, and that's the way human work. If you look at human civilization and if different cultures or whatnot, you see evidence of it everywhere. And so I think it's important, again, if you just stop censoring, start exposing everyone to everyone, even the crazy people. Actually, like I said earlier, let the crazy people have the biggest mic, give them the biggest
Yeah.
platform, and let people decide for themselves. And I assure you that over the long run, not in the short term, over the long run, we'll go the right direction. So
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. And that's the best part about having civil discourse, right? Is that you can both argue your point, but ultimately come to a negotiated solution, right? And that's how it's always been in the past, right? We always had two sides warring over different things or whatever, be it trade wars or civil wars, whatever. But ultimately, there's always a negotiated solution at the end of the day, right? So, I get bits of what would please me, and you get bits of what would please you as well, and that we both of us can live equally together, right? So
Right.
one thing I wanted to ask you before I let you go, what do you see for the future of your business?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's very exciting where we are today. From my perspective, not to say that people being divided is exciting, but the excitement is more that there's such an opportunity to bring people together, and so that's where I see potential and opportunity and something that nobody else is doing in the marketplace. And so I think that not only is it good for the platform and the success of the platform, but just on a personal note, I think it's something that's good for humanity, and I think that it
Right,
can benefit all people. And so that's really kind of where I see the direction is taking away from the divisiveness, starting to get people to truly understand and open their minds. Like I said, most people, if you ask them, actually probably all people, if you ask them, they'll say they're open-minded. But I think we all know probably most people are not, if
not
not all people are not. And so I think that, not mixing the open-mindedness with changing your mind. It's just open-minded, just, taking in more data, taking in more information instead of knee-jerk reaction is to punch when you see something. Just listen, hear. And if I disagree with you, I say, it was nice talking to you. I disagree with you. Thanks for sharing. you know, versus me calling you a name or, whatever
right.
else, goes on today. One is
I find
productive.
that highly interesting, though, that people do that on social media. I mean, you never see people behaving like that in real life, but on social
Yeah,
media,
well,
it's a
I mean, it's
completely
because
different picture.
there's more consequences, right? People
Mhm.
can type something behind a keyboard and that's it. They don't have any consequences. But when you're in front of somebody, you can get, embarrassed, humiliated. You can get punched. There's all kinds of other, consequences that come with that. And so, people are driven, by incentive and punishment. That's just the way that humans react. And so that's how, if we want to change the direction of any policy, any human behavior, all that, you got to manage those two things. And so, you know if you start to pay people more in unemployment, for example, or if you pay people longer to stay home, guess what people are going to do? The utopian principle is, no, everybody will do the right thing and they'll only do it, for as long as they need. But the reality is, no, they won't. Most people don't. There are a few that will say, you know what, I'm not going to take any money. I'm just going to work hard, and and whatever the subject or topic is. But for the most part, 90 to 95% of people are kind of within a big group, and they all, you know, they live their life with the incentive and the punishment, the reward and the punishment, mantra. And whether it's through government or their friends and family, or just the way they live life, they decide things based off of that punishment reward. It's very selfish, but again, that's just the way humans have evolved. And, if we want to, like you said, it's becoming a smaller world. We're going through this incredible change where, people of certain kinds or skin colors or cultures or backgrounds usually stuck together. Now we're integrating, and the effects of that integration, part of it is cancel culture, part of it is this divisiveness and all that, and we have to get through this. But again, it's just important that, we're able to respectfully be exposed to the other side. Otherwise, it will become more extreme, and people will fight, people will die, people will suffer, all of these negative consequences, and we don't want that. We want people to come together and be happy. There's so many things, whether curing cancer, COVID is the first vaccine, but we need to get to, but just curing cancer, for example, or colonizing another planet. Let's say a meteor comes and hits Earth. There's so many things that we can productively work together on, and we're focused on, hey, is this statue racist, or is this hate speech, or
Right.
things that really have no effect on
Hmm.
on
It's like you're
humanity.
focusing on the symptom, but not really the problem. I
That
would,
that that's a big
yeah.
part of it. Yep, definitely.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I see a lot right now. People don't want to discuss. Instead, they just want to pull down like statues. Like I've seen, at least in the States, I did deface a statue of Abraham Lincoln for some reason.
Yeah. No, and I see it. I mean, like there are some statues from that I've heard of, and again, I don't want to get into names that probably deserve to be taken down.
Right.
Not because of I think that we should take down statues, but I think that if you look at the whole story, when those statues were erected, the reasons, the people, and all that, there's probably some in there. But when you look at somebody like Abraham Lincoln, and I'm not a historian or expert on Lincoln, but you know, he has a kind of a small thing on his resume. He
Yeah, he
abolished
freed the
slavery.
slaves. Yeah, exactly.
It's a little bit bigger than it's a little bigger point than my resume and most people I know. Um, I think that you get it doesn't excuse the other things, but I think it's important to understand the other things as well. We can't be judging people based off of today's standards and understanding.
Mm.
If you put most people from today who are complaining about Abraham Lincoln in Abraham Lincoln's shoes, they not only wouldn't have, abolished slavery, they probably wouldn't have been president at the time. They wouldn't have been in a position, they wouldn't have done nothing, right? So
Right.
they're claiming they're defacing, but if you put them in the city, they would have done nothing. They would have had no benefit to humanity, but they're criticizing someone. And again, they're right. I think when something is wrong, it's important to call it out, but it's important to understand the context and, come to a productive conclusion, not to name calling or, I'm right, you're wrong and all that. If that's just not productive and that's not getting us anywhere, and that's having us take steps backwards. So that's what I think is important. I hear some of the concerns about Abraham Lincoln. Specifically, I heard about the statue and his position compared to, you know, everybody has valid points. It's just I think we need to look at the bigger picture and not look at it from our selfish individual points of view.
Correct. Absolutely correct. But once again, dude, thank you for coming on, man. Like this has been really insightful for me. Like
No,
I
thank you
really
very much
appreciate
for
it.
having me. It was definitely a pleasure. I know it's late here, and we were both busy, so this
Yeah,
was the
yeah.
only time we talk. So I really appreciate you having me on. It was a pleasure speaking, and like I said, I encourage everyone to check out 4B. Hopefully, in about 2 weeks, we'll officially launch, but it is ready and live now, and hopefully, we can change the world.
Hopefully. And with what you're doing, kudos to you, man. Like not many people, I've not met many people who share this particular view as well as doing something about it, like what you're
Yep.
doing.
Yep.
So I wish you all the best,
Yep.
and keep going at it. And I'm gonna link your website, YouTube, Instagram, whatever
Yep.
on on
I
the
appreciate it.
video as well.
Yeah.
So people can go check you out, because I think it's important, and I keep stressing on this, that it's important to have civil discourse and to have discussion and conversation between both sides. So yeah, thanks once again.
No, thank you. Yeah, we have a long ways to go, like I said. So all the support, I can't. I unfortunately don't have the budget to compete against the big guys, and so for me, it's word of mouth, it's guerrilla marketing, and it's really making sure that people understand what we're doing, and we provide something that truly is beneficial, and getting that word out. So all the support is appreciated, and I know looking back, this is going to be really good.
Absolutely, absolutely. Amir, until I see you next time, take
Yep.
care.
Thank you
All
again.
right.
Have a great night, and take care. Thank you.
You too.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.